our next spirituality coffee break. This morning we're honored to have Bonnie Shafrin with us. Bonnie is the director of the Lux Center, and she has brought a number of things to share. We have some things to share as well. We have some beverages over here. We have some bagels and lox, and there's apples and pears around if you can find them. So please help yourself to a little nosh while we hear Bonnie tell us more about Jewish spirituality. Thank you, Bonnie.
Well, I thank the able staff of the Dehon Library for inviting me to talk to you this morning. And thank you for all of you here that decided to attend and hear what I have to say, and for giving me 10 to 15 minutes of your time, in which I have to take 5,000 years of Jewish spirituality. So I thought I would start with looking at what do we mean by spirit. When we talk about spirit, we're talking about the essence of something. We're talking about the central point. If we're talking about human beings, we're not talking about our bodies, we're not talking about our intellect, we're talking about something else. Can't always put our finger on it. Sometimes we call it the soul, but it's something else. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And what does that mean in terms of Jewish spirituality? Well, I could quote tomes and volumes of books, of paragraphs, of sentences, but I'm going to focus on words instead, because when I thought about it, I think words are really the central focus of Judaism. Words are important to Judaism. Words are taken very seriously in Judaism. The word in Hebrew for spirit is ruach, and the word ruach appears in the Hebrew Bible 389 times. So spirit is important, words are important. What words are we really talking about? We're talking about really, to begin with, the words in the Hebrew Bible, which are a world of words. And if we start with the beginning, which is how the Hebrew Bible starts with, in the beginning, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We normally think, well, of course, what are we talking about in the beginning? We are talking about creation. So, of course, we're starting at the beginning. But in Judaism, we look at the words in the beginning and study them, turn them. In the beginning of what? Are we talking about in the beginning of the Hebrew Bible, of that story? Are we talking about in the beginning of God's relationship to human beings, because it's a story of that also? Are we talking about in the beginning of the Jewish people, which is also what is told in the Hebrew Bible? As I said, words are taken seriously. In Judaism, speaking evil words is a sin. So we have to watch what words come out of our mouth. When we are talking, going back to the Hebrew Bible, after we talk about in the beginning, God speaks to people. So first of all, he speaks to Adam and Eve, asks them to not do one thing, and do they listen to his words? No, but there's consequences. So we learn from that. After he talked to Adam and Eve, he talked to Noah, told Noah what to do, how to save the human race from the great flood that he was going to, and from the evil that was going on in the world. And so Noah listened. He was a man who was righteous for his time, as he was described. And an initial covenant was communicated between God and Noah. After Noah, there was Abraham. And Abraham was a revolutionary. He discovered or came up with the philosophy that there's one God over all of humanity. That was revolutionary in his time. And he was told by God one word, lech, walk. He was told to walk with God. He was told to leave everything he knew, everything that was familiar to him, and walk and go to a place that God would show him. So those words were important. And continuing on, Abraham and God entered into a covenant that said that Abraham would be the leader of a great people, that his offspring would be as plentiful as the stars in the sky or the grains of sand on the earth, and that he would be with, if Abraham and his people would listen to the words of God, God would be with them and protect him. So words continue to be important. Of course, then there's the story of Moses and the words that are given to him. And probably the central chapter of the Hebrew Bible is the chapter that talks about the Ten Commandments, found in Exodus, and it's repeated in Deuteronomy. In Hebrew, we don't talk about really 10 commandments. In Hebrew, the 10 commandments are Aseret ha-dibrot. Aseret is the number 10, ha is the, dibrot is not commandments. Mitzvot are commandments, but that's not what it says. It says dibrot. Dibrot are sayings, declarations, words. So when you talk about the 10 commandments, literally translating it from the Hebrew are the 10 words, the 10 sayings that God has bestowed upon humanity, all of humanity. So, okay. There are 3 other words that are important to Judaism. There's a melody that talks about al shlosha devarim, upon 3 words or 3 sayings that Judaism are central to Judaism. One is al haTorah, on the study of Torah, which I'm going to talk about on Wednesday in the lobby from 12 to 12:15. On service, al ha'avodah, which is service, which is worship, and on al ha'gemilut hasadim, which are deeds of loving kindness. And if the study of Torah and worship of God lead to deeds of loving kindness. So it all kind of goes in a circle. I'm going to talk today mainly about the worship, about service to God, and what does that mean in Judaism? How is that unique and different? And first of all, the word for prayer in Hebrew is tefillah. Tefillah means to judge oneself. So as one is praying, the idea is not only communicating with God, not only developing that relationship with God, but looking internally and judging oneself. When you look at what are in the prayers of Judaism, in the liturgy, they all lead to reminding us what we need to be doing in the world. What is our place in the world? Who is God? And what kind of behavior is expected of us as we go throughout the world? Whether we petition God or thank God for whatever is good was granted, or extol God for his many awesome attributes, all prayer is intended to make us better people. So that really is the main intention. So when Jews are praying, there is a way to get in the mood for prayer, and that is almost to dress in a certain outfit. And it's mainly, traditionally, it's men who are required to do so. Women, not so much. Women are not held to time requirements. Prayer is a time requirement because there are certain times of day that you are required to pray, because women have the most of the time, although today in our modern society not so much, but we're responsible for taking care of the children, childbirth, the home. Women are not usually held to time commitments. And so some of those things are a kippah, or you might know it as a yarmulke in Yiddish. The reason Jews wear a kippah, which many people actually have asked me, is why do Jews wear kippah? The reason is actually to remind us that God is above. That as we go through our day, especially if we're in synagogue, but as we go through our day, God is always present, and so be mindful of what you do and what you say and the words you use, because we need to be respectful to God. The other thing which you might have seen before is a prayer shawl. It's called a talit. This one is a decorative one. It has a kind of Hebrew words at the top. It doesn't have to have that. That's because before you put on a talit, you say a blessing. Just as in Judaism, most of the time you say a blessing before you do most things. This isn't really a traditional looking talit, but it does have what's required. It has the blue and white stripes, which are traditional, and all of the talit have fringes. These are called tzitzit, these special fringes. They are tied in knots and wound in a certain way, which represents the 613 mitzvot, or commandments, in the Torah. And so as people are praying, often they're going to be touching those tzitzit. It's just a kind of a habit. It's almost like, if you pray the rosary and you use the beads, this is kind of a reminder also of what you're supposed to be doing. So the prayer shawl looks like. So most of the time men are going to be wearing it. Only really in Reform Judaism. Sometimes in Conservative Judaism you will see women who choose to wear it. Interestingly enough, when I went to my son's wedding, for part of the service, there was a Torah reading, and my husband and I were asked to do a Torah blessing, and a man handed me a tallis, and I said, "Oh, no, that's okay. I don't usually wear one." And he said, "Do you want to do the blessings for the Torah? Here, you're going to wear a tallis." So that's one way to get you in the mood for prayer. It separates you from your normal daily whatever you're doing, and you're dressed in a special way just for prayer. It gets you ready. It's a feeling of enwrapment. Some people feel like God's arms are embracing them as they pray. Sometimes it's just feeling like it's a safe space, and so that's why people do that. Okay, I just want to read a quote about Jewish prayer, because I won't remember all this just to say it without it. Jewish prayer uses language of the Hebrew Bible and reflects the Jewish soul. It is prayer that expresses the basic values of the Jewish people and affirms the central articles of the Jewish faith. It reflects the Jewish historical experience and gives expression to Judaism's future aspirations. So that, in a nutshell, kind of is a summary of Jewish liturgy and Jewish prayer, and might make it a little bit different than all other prayer, even though all religions, prayer is an important part of religious observance. Jews may choose to use their own words in prayer. They're encouraged to do that when you're praying to God, but there is a set liturgy for the prayer books. The prayer book is called a Siddur, which means order. So there's a specific order of the prayers. It doesn't matter which synagogue I walk into. I can walk into a synagogue in Jerusalem, in Louisiana. I can walk into a synagogue in China. Wherever there might be a synagogue, I can pretty much follow the prayers because they pretty much are the same. Some synagogues and some branches of Judaism will have more Hebrew, some will have more English, some will have additional prayers that others don't use, but the basic prayers, there's really two basic prayers. The basic prayers are the Shema, which is the Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, which isn't really a prayer, it's really a statement. That was stated by Moses as he gave the children of Israel, passed on the Torah or the Ten Commandments to the children of Israel. I forgot what I was going to say.
Second prayer.
Oh, the second prayer is it's called the Amida, or the standing prayer. It's also known as, thank you, as the Shemona Esrei, which are the 18 benedictions or the 18 prayers. That's the central prayer to Judaism. It is said 3 times a day. The Shema is only said morning and evening prayers. So there are 3 basic times that Jews are required to pray: a morning, an afternoon, and an evening prayer. Not all Jews do that, but traditional Jews, very observant Jews, will either say their prayers at home or they will be in the synagogue. Many will say them in the synagogue. Okay. Until the time of the Second Temple, really Jewish worship had to do with the sacrifice of animals in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. That changed after the destruction. Well, Ezra the scribe in the year 485 before Jesus was the first one that set the 3 times a day prayers, and also an outline of what Jewish prayer should consist of. And that kind of stayed like that until the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70 after Jesus, and then the Jews had to do something else. First of all, they were dispersed throughout the world, and so prayer as worship replaced the sacrifice of animals, and has been that way ever since, and has been a good way to continue the spread and development of Judaism. There's two types of prayer, and I know I'm like 15 minutes, so I'm gonna try to wrap up. There's just the order of the prayer, the regularity of the prayer, the structure of prayer, which is keva in Hebrew, and there's the kavanah. The kavanah is the prayer of the heart, meaning you shouldn't just, if you have to, it's okay to be partaking in the ritual, the 3 times a day, the obligation of prayer that reminds you of what you're supposed to be doing, but really the real essence of prayer is the prayer from the heart and the soul and the looking internally, and that's the kavanah, which was based on, if you know the story of Hannah in the book of Samuel, Jewish prayer, or that's considered the model of Jewish prayer. I'm not going to go into the story now because I don't want to take any more of your time than you need to. And so, yes. Oh, sure. I forgot about that. Yeah. Men also, especially men who are traditional, will wear something called tefillin. And I've never worn tefillin. I'm a woman. Women usually don't wear tefillin. But it's this little box. You may have seen pictures. In fact, there's one of the paintings in the hallway from the dining room that shows a picture of an elderly Jew with his tefillin. So this little box has the Shema and its blessings in it, and some other prayers, and it's worn on the forehead because we'll talk about this on Wednesday too. Jews are commanded to have these words which I command thee this day shall be in thy heart, and they shall be for frontlets between thine eyes. And so this kind of goes on the forehead, and it wraps around the head, and then it goes down to the arm, the left arm, because that's the side your heart is on, and it wraps around the fingers, and I don't know if you've seen anybody, usually you're not going to, unless they're in somebody's home when they're praying, and usually even in their home they're going to do this pretty privately, or in the synagogue, especially for morning prayers. You see the men wearing their tefillin. And I just wanted to finish with, thank you. This sums up to me what Jewish prayer is. It's Psalm 19, and it goes like this. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight. Be acceptable, my rock and my redeemer, God, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if anybody wants to stick around for questions. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.